Welcome to the morning show with Bob Hoffmaster on News Talk 1450 KFIZ in Fond du Lac on a Monday. Hey, it's Walleye Weekend week. And, it's Monday. I'm already thinking about the weekend. That's pretty much par for the course. But welcome to the show. I want to welcome in three gentlemen that are part of the Fond du Lac Amateur Radio Club. And this is really an interesting deal. They have their annual field day operations coming up in a couple of weeks. But we're going to talk a little bit about amateur radio and why they do it, what they do, and what the field day operations are all about. So let's welcome in. I'll go from my left to my right, Dick Finn. How are you, sir?
Oh, doing fine. Thank you, Bob.
Move that a little closer there. Welcome to the show. How long have you been at ham radio? Is that amateur ham? Right. How long have you been ham radio operator?
Well, I've only been in it for about 3 or 4 years now. Got going thanks to Jack Heil and his classes for the technician class license.
So you're kind of a newbie.
I'm the new kid on the block.
Yes, you are. We also have Jack Heil. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Bob.
Tell us, how long have you been involved in amateur radio?
I started with ham radio back when I was 17. Really? So that's, I don't want to give away my age, but that's 60 years ago.
And we also have with us Doug Schultz. Doug, how are you, sir?
Good. I've been in ham radio, 1983, so...
Oh, my God.
33 years, something like that, anyway.
Unbelievable.
Been my license for that long.
So let's get started by just a quick, I don't know who wants to take the lead. Give us a quick rundown on the Fond du Lac Amateur Radio Club. How many people are involved, what it entails, all that kind of stuff.
Right now, I think we've got between 55 and 60 members, so it's a pretty big club.
Yes.
Very diversified group. We have some licensed members who are as young as 14, and some that are in their 70s and 80s.
Oh, my gosh. So how often do you meet?
Once a month, second Monday of the month at Moraine Park.
Okay. And what happens at the meetings?
We usually have a program. Joe usually gets a
Joe Scheibinger?
Joe Scheibinger gets a speaker or something on Skype, and we have a program. We can ask questions, after the presentation, and then we have a business meeting,
Well, I don't know who wants to take the lead on this, but I'd like to ask what the draw, what draws you. Maybe I'll ask each and every one of you. So, Doug, since you had the floor, what brought you into amateur radio, ham radio in the beginning?
I built a shortwave receiver when I was 12 or 13 with my brother-in-law. It was back when they had night kits. Okay. And I was listening to the earthquake response on that receiver in 1962 when they had the big earthquake in Alaska.
Really?
Yeah, and I said, boy, this is something, I ought to get into this hobby. Well, it took a long time for I finally to do it, but...
So you way back then, you did it with your brother-in-law?
Yeah, we built a kit, essentially, a radio kit.
And did you have any idea? Was it his idea to do it?
Well, he had a shortwave receiver, and he says, well, we can build a kit, and you can have your own shortwave receiver.
So you built that, and then did you kind of just put it away and forget about it for years?
Yeah, for quite a few years, yeah. And then I got back involved in the hobby, and I built a transceiver kit after that.
What is that?
Well, essentially, you can talk on it.
Oh, okay.
On the ham radio. Once I got the license, I could talk on it. It was an old Heath kit.
So first you had the radio where you could listen,
yep.
And then eventually you got the part that you could... Now, I don't know, maybe I'll move over to Jack here. The license. Explain the license. What do you need to... What do you have to be able to do this?
Licenses used to require a certain amount of Morse code. That's not true anymore. You have to have a background in some background in electronics. You have to know the FCC rules because we are licensed by the Federal Communications Commission.
So some of the rules, there are certain things you can't say and that sort of thing, and certain things you can't do.
Well, and also the frequencies that you use, the amount of power that is put out, and how clean the signals must be.
Okay.
So there are quite a few things and there's also safety involved. Anytime that you're working with electronics equipment,
sure,
you have to be very, very aware of safety.
So how much of a process is it to get your license?
It is not bad at all. We have not been running classes, and I'm the education chair, I haven't been running classes now for about a year and a half because there's so many good classes that are available on the internet. So if you want to get started, I would recommend two things. One, come to one of our club meetings and get a mentor. Again, they're the second Monday of each month at Moraine Park College.
What time's that at?
At 7 p.m.
Okay.
And we have open meetings. We very often have visitors, and we're very happy to have people come in and talk with us and possibly get a mentor to help them get started in the hobby. And then I would recommend that, secondly, that they look up some of the technician classes that are on the internet and learn about the hobby. And that's the way Isaac, one of our young men, I think he's 16 now.
No, he's 14.
Geez, 14.
He's 14.
Mm-hmm. He's going into high school. He's going to be a freshman in the fall.
Really?
Yeah.
So it is a wide range of people in this.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
How did you get involved, Jack, and why?
I was bored.
Really?
One summer, one of my friends had gotten some information on ham radio, and Kent was a good friend, and he said, "Hey, how about we get into ham radio together?" So, in fact, we did. I had a mentor who was the police chief of our little town in the suburb of Chicago.
Okay.
And he claimed he was the first licensed ham in the United States when licenses were handed out.
Now, I don't know why Doug is snickering about this.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
Well,
it sounds good, though, doesn't it?
Yep, sounds excellent.
So
you're buying it, right? You're taking his word for it.
I'm just I'm repeating what he said.
Okay.
I'm not going to. Hey, I'm a scientist. I don't go unless I've got a certain amount of verification of what's going on.
And it is Dr. Jack Heil, by the way, right?
Right.
Yes.
But I only use the doctor when I'm want to get rid of an insurance agent. Or something like that. Anyway.
So you started way back then, and it just snowballed? You keep
Well, actually, when I went to college and did my graduate work, I let my license slide, and it wasn't until I actually started teaching here back in the 1970s that the dean said, well, there's a group that wants to use the parking lot over the weekend at the university, and it's a ham radio group. He says, you know all that technical stuff. He says, would you keep an eye on them, make sure that they don't mess up, and which I did. And it was really a good group of individuals, very diversified as to backgrounds and such, but good hams, and I just got back into the hobby again.
Now, Dick, what about you? You've only been in it for 3 years. What was it were you just looking for something new to do, or?
Well, a little bit of that, certainly. I had an interest in electronics since I was a boy, but the Morse code requirement was a little too daunting for me.
Okay, yes, I understand.
I got my degree in electrical engineering and was an electrical engineer for my working career, and then I was retired. And one day, looking at Action Advertiser, I saw an article put out by Jack, actually, announcing his technician class, and it said in prominent letters, no Morse code requirement. So I signed up for the class, got the license, and bought the radios. It's not an expensive thing to get started. You can buy a actual ham radio for under $40, well under $40.
Really?
They're limited distance and everything, but with the repeaters we have in town, you can talk to people all over the city on these small handheld radios.
Now, let me ask you about all three of you. I imagine you have better equipment than that now, right?
Well, I have a nice Yaesu radio that you can listen to all over the country and all over the world on.
Do you have some fun examples of places you've listened to or talked to?
Oh, I have not key to talking to anyone is having a good antenna, which I don't have.
Okay.
So I've been pretty much limited to the people around the United States, and I think the best time I had was working with Jack. He acted as my mentor to get me on the radio, and sat down in his basement with his radio, and I got my first experience. And the first experience always sticks in your mind. And
Sure.
I rather nervously talked to some fellows, and I think it was Alabama or Arkansas, and it was just a lot of fun doing it. And since then, I've gotten out on my own. I think if you're interested in hearing worldwide type stuff, these are the guys you want to talk to.
Well, let me ask both of you. Maybe I'll go over to Doug or Jack, either one of you. During times of difficulty, for instance, let's say what happened this weekend in London, is there those types of times? Do you get on the radio and communicate with people that are not necessarily intimately involved, but I mean, when we've had some of these big things, I imagine there are people all over the world doing this, right?
Oh, yeah, there are people all over the world. In the U.S., there's, 700 and some thousand licensed amateurs.
Okay.
Right.
All over the world, there's several million, I'm sure.
About 2 million, I think, Doug.
I think, it's several million. One example I had was a situation where there was an earthquake in Northridge, California. Okay. And I had some people from my church that had a son and daughter-in-law that lived out there, and they couldn't get a hold of them.
Right.
Because cell lines were down, phone lines were down out there. And I got on the HF radio and talked to California. They had a net going already. They have nets for these on particular frequencies, and I found the frequency they were on, and I found the county that these people were located in, because they had different frequencies for different counties that were affected by it. And I got a hold of them, and I said, geez, I need to find out if these people are okay or not. And they said, give us a day, and we'll get back to you. And they got back to me the next day and said, oh, yeah, they're fine. The communication lines are down. The cells are jammed. You can't get communication in or out of Northridge, California.
Wow. So I bet there are people that were very happy.
Oh, yeah, they were happier than heck. They said, oh, geez, we found out they're fine. Yeah.
And that's one of the things, Jack, that you guys are able to do and when all else goes down. And we like to say KFIZ, the one you depend on. But if something were to happen, and we do have, we have generators and stuff, but we could be off the air. Yeah. You guys theoretically wouldn't be, right?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. And we can transmit messages that are appropriate for governments to that are needed. So we can do it with voice. We can do it with code.
You guys can.
Yes.
Yeah. Dick can't do it with code.
Oh, yes, he can.
Well, we'll get him.
Do you learn it yet? Do you get it?
No, I still have not learned it. I've made several additional attempts, but
I'm just kidding.
You got to be motivated to I guess.
I don't blame you one bit. But
well, that's really the purpose of field day. We were talking a little bit about field day, and a field day really is an exercise in emergency communications.
Yes. It's coming up on the 24th and 25th.
24th and 25th, and we invite the public to come out to the north parking lot of the University of Wisconsin here in Fond du Lac.
Yes.
After 2 o'clock on Saturday, the 24th.
Mm-hmm. Actually, 1 o'clock. Starts at 1.
No, but I want to give them an hour to get going before.
Yeah.
Because sometimes things don't work. We have to put up our own antennas.
Uh-huh.
We use electric generators. You can't hook into any power lines or power lines or use any of the infrastructure.
That would defeat the purpose, right? The whole idea is you don't have any.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. And we operate out of tents or a van or something like that. And but also we have a food tent and have a good time.
Really?
With camaraderie at the same time. So it's really a dual purpose. One is, of course, the camaraderie amongst the people in the club, but it's also this emergency communications that we set up and can set up in a matter of hours, because we usually start at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning setting up the equipment.
The antennas and the
Right.
and the stations anyway, and we run into Murphy's Law every once in a while, and something doesn't work quite right, and we got to take it down. And
but I'd imagine if God forbid we have an emergency, things probably won't be running smoothly at the time. So I had a caller that called in and had mentioned that there was used to be, and I actually kind of remember this from way back in the day at Old Goodrich High School. There was an amateur radio club, a ham radio club at Fond du Lac High School. No longer is at Goodrich High School. No longer the case at Fond du Lac High School. And that kind of leads me to this question. I don't know who wants to take it. There are a lot more ways to be connected across the world today than there were many years ago. Right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
There was a time when what you guys do was probably one of the only ways you could truly be connected to the world. Now with the internet, with cell phones, everything else, we can find things out instantly. But how has that affected the world of amateur radio?
I would say it's affected it negatively in many respects, because many of the people who would normally, let's say, get into ham radio are now experimenting with robotics or with computers.
Because that's kind of that same kind of mentality, if you will, that passion to learn and
to learn things and new things and look towards the future. But ham radio does that also. It may sound like ham radio is old stuff, but in fact there are different kinds of modes, different ways of putting radios together, all kinds of different challenges. When you're working with ham radio, you're also learning about atmospherics, learning about sunspot cycles. You learn about electronics. You, of course, learn to work with people. So there are a lot of different aspects to it, and that's before you start talking about doing emergency work and with amateur radio emergency service or something of that nature, which is a formal organization.
Doug, you were telling us off the air a little bit about some of the new waves, if you will, in ham radio. Can you explain a couple of these new things that really broaden the horizons even more, correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have members that use satellites, amateur satellites, to communicate with people on the other side of the world.
What do you mean by amateur satellites?
So they're put up in space.
Ham organizations.
Ham organizations.
Yeah.
They build them at universities. They put them up, and they see how they work. And
really?
They communicate on the VHF and UHF frequencies, very high frequency, or UHF, ultra high frequency. And you might be able to talk to somebody in Russia, or you talk to somebody in South Africa on that. We have some members that do that, use satellites to do that.
How do you get access to those satellites?
You just have to wait your turn, essentially, and when it comes around, they use you can go on, there's apps out there that give you the times that they're going to be overhead and how long you can talk. And
give me an example of that. Like how long might if something
it just depends on how high the satellites are, I guess, in orbit.
They're low Earth orbit, so they orbit about once every hour and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're only overhead, perhaps accessible for 10, 15 minutes.
10 or 15 minutes.
And then theoretically, a lot of people are trying to bounce their signals off of those satellites.
Yep.
At the
Actually,
same
it's
time?
a repeater.
It's a repeater.
You broadcast on one frequency. It rebroadcasts on a different frequency.
On a different frequency, and then the guy answers back, essentially.
So you have roughly 10 minutes or so to maybe...
until that satellite is down below the horizon and you can't access it anymore.
And then there's moon bounce.
Explain that.
Go ahead.
You know the astronauts have put a mirror on the moon to bounce laser light off of that so that they could actually determine to within a foot how far away the moon is. Now that's with light.
Okay.
But now in amateur radio, we also have people that use a dish and they beam a strong signal to the moon, reflect the radio signal off of the moon, and then to other receivers.
Off the
surface of
the surface of the
total
moon.
surface of the moon.
That is correct.
Oh my gosh! Mm-hmm. And then what does that allow them to do?
Well, they talk to
different
other people
parts of the world. But
exactly.
it broadens the area they can communicate.
And then you got the International Space Station. A lot of the astronauts are amateur radio operators, and they talk to schools all the time.
Yeah, they used to be required to be amateur radio operators.
Most of them are, even today, are still...
Astronauts?
Yep.
Astronauts.
They're amateur radio
required to
operators
be,
because they're
ham radio.
amateur radio transceivers on the International Space Station. It's a backup system for them.
Would it be possible for Jack, you in your basement, to talk to somebody on the space station or not?
Theoretically, yes. You need to worry about frequency shift due to the Doppler effect. That is the fact that the satellite is moving very rapidly. It shifts the frequency a little bit. One of our members does work with that. That's Lloyd Vandervoort. And he has a radio that automatically shifts the frequency to take care of the Doppler effect. But that, the satellites that the astronauts are in are moving so fast, on the order of 17,000 miles an hour, and that it shifts the frequency when they're coming towards us, towards a higher frequency, and then as they're moving away, it shifts the frequency downward. Sort of like a train going by, that type of thing, where the frequency of sound shifts.
Oh, my God.
Reason.
So, but theoretically,
I could do it.
Yeah, a lot of schools communicate with them. It's a big deal for getting kids involved in STEM programs and stuff like that, because they can talk to astronauts in space. Up.
Can I ask you this? This is interesting to me because you just mentioned the STEM programs, and this is clearly something that is going very strong in Fond du Lac now, the STEM Academy, STEM Institute.
Yes, very good.
And it seems to be, at least on some level, a wave of the future. I would think those young minds would be classic ham radio operators, if you will. Is that something, have you guys reached out to the STEM programs at all to get, because I would think that sounds like it would be right up their alley as far as their passion to learn new things and all the different stuff. You guys, which by the way, 95% of it is right over the top of my head, but I keep nodding saying, yes, Doppler, yes, I've heard it on the weather. But no, but those kids would know exactly what you're talking about. I would think that'd be a great field to mine, if you will, for new people.
Yeah, I have not reached out to them specifically. We're looking at possibility of setting up a station somewhere where young people could go after school to actually operate, so that if they were to get a license, they could then operate the equipment themselves, or equivalently to have one of the older hams there to operate the equipment, because they could operate as a third-party individual without a license, as long as there's a ham controlling the equipment in the first place.
Jack, do you have any great, more memorable conversations or activities over the years?
I think one that really stimulated me was back when I was still in high school. And I was talking with a fellow in Upper Michigan. Actually, he was in the lower part of, but right against Lake Michigan. He said he was about a mile from Lake Michigan. Okay. And he said that the wind was so strong, and we were having a terrible storm at the time.
And you were living in
Illinois,
Chicago
area, in the suburb. And he said that Lake Michigan was now in his backyard, and normally it was a mile away. And I could see he says, my antenna, he says, I don't know if it's going to stay up too long, he says, but I see the antenna swaying back and forth, and I could see his signal strength going up and down.
Just with the wind?
With the wind, yeah, and with what was going on there. And I thought that really kind of stimulated me to look into doing some emergency kinds of work, because you can still get through with radio.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that again here, because you do have your field day operations coming up on the 24th and 25th. Public's invited, right? If people
invited,
are just curious, they want to come in and maybe take a look a little bit and talk to you guys and pick your brains a little bit, they're welcome.
We're going to start on the air at 1 o'clock on Saturday the 24th. But we'd like people to come perhaps around 2 o'clock.
As you were saying earlier.
In case Murphy visits us, we have to be putting up a different antenna or something in that first time, and to get going. But 2 o'clock on, and we operate for 24 hours right through until 1 p.m. on Sunday afternoon.
What do you do then? Are you?
Well, we have one group that does the phone. Excuse my phone. Has the voice tent, as we call it, and Doug is in charge of the voice tent. Rick Robinson is in charge of CW. That's da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yes, sure.
And then we have a third tent, which is a GOTA. That's Get on the Air group. And that's where actually we could have people come, and as a third party, they could operate on the air.
Really?
Yes. And we'd have a licensed ham there to make sure that it's operated properly and to help them operate. But they could get on the air and operate. Now, this is contesting.
What does that mean?
The whole idea of this is to check out your equipment. Well, one of the ways of checking your equipment is to see how many contacts you can make and how far away within the United States and Canada. This is United States and Canada type of contest.
Okay.
And so we try to get as many contacts as possible and in the shortest amount of time using these different modes of operation.
Is there a specific reason for the 24th and 25th? Is this the entire United States and Canada? Or
that is correct.
So this
it's
is
national
or North American based.
North American based.
Because it's light most of the time.
So this this is the day when ham operators all across North America are going at it.
Yeah, and there's between 35 and 40,000 people operating that day.
Yeah, the stations.
That
many stations. We
most clubs are doing it in Canada and the U.S. at the same time.
Can I brag a little?
Sure, brag a little.
Few years ago, in our 2A classification, we came in 8th in the nation as far as the number of contacts.
And is that you were able to do that because of your equipment, because you guys know how to work the equipment properly, all the above? Or?
It's Doug.
No, I didn't do it by myself. We had some great CW operators too.
But how does that work? Well, how are you able to do it get more than others?
If band conditions are really good, which they aren't right now, but
right. Why is that?
Because of sunspot. We're at the low point of the sunspot cycle.
Okay.
So,
but quickly, I don't mean to cut you off, but the sunspots, are those pretty? They
run an 11-year cycle.
Okay. So
5.5 years from now, we'll be back, a lot better conditions.
Okay.
But yeah, Jack has logged for me a couple of times, and I can probably on phone do 90 or 100 an hour, probably contacts an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
So you guys were 8th in North America.
That's correct.
Wow.
In that contest.
In that contest in our class.
Right.
What are the different classes?
Depending on how many stations you have on the air.
Okay. Wow. The equipment change. How has it changed? And this one is for you two guys that have been involved a little bit more than Dick. I don't know how it's changed in your 3 years, but in your years, how has it changed?
I'll tell you a little bit because I started earlier. Mm-hmm. The reason I actually got into ham radio was that I heard about these newfangled things. They were called transistors. Everything was pretty much tube type, except we did have a little transistor radio.
Sure.
And I thought, wow, if you can listen on a radio, why can't you transmit it? So as a high school student, I was trying to get going on a project where I would have a radio transmitter with a transistorized.
Yeah.
So it was small and handy and portable. And I found that I got my license and stuff, and I was going the right direction. The problem was I couldn't afford the transistors, which were in the $50 category that would go up into those frequencies.
Sure.
As a high school student. So I did a Van de Graaff generator instead.
And you were able to.
Yeah, and I had fun with that. But I really got into ham radio for the idea of the electronics as opposed to talking to somebody on the air.
So you were more interested in how they were built,
the
and
technical
the technical
area.
side, and then the other side was just
and I
something
still
fun.
am pretty much. I'm pretty much a technical kind of guy.
What about Doug? What about you?
Well, I mean, I started out with a Heathkit transceiver,
what's
all
that mean?
tubes primarily. Other than I think it had a couple of transistors in the VFO, and now everything is solid state and it's a lot smaller.
So that is the other thing I would imagine. I mean, I would think back. I picture things I've seen in movies and TV.
Boat anchors, we used to call them.
Just big things and people down in their basement with all kinds of tons of equipment and big things. Is everything like computers and everything else?
Everything's
much
gotten
now?
smaller, yeah.
How much room do you need to do this?
Oh, I mean, you can get transceivers that put out 100 watts to talk around the world, and they're this big.
I mean, they're like
yeah, like this computer almost about that size.
yeah, like a real small computer.
Yeah, 10 by 10 by 3 or something.
Yeah, they're small.
Wow.
They don't have to be big today.
Did you get into it because of the technical side, or because you wanted to talk to people?
I wanted to talk to people.
What about you, Dick?
Well, I just wanted to get back into electronics after a career starting as an electrical engineer, doing circuit design, digital circuit design.
So this was just up your alley.
It was up my alley, but I ended up my career as a project manager, not doing technical work at all. Now that I'm retired, I wanted to get back into something technical again.
Get back to your roots a little bit?
Get back to my roots, yeah. And ham radio really did it for me. There's the radios, you can still buy kit radios. So you can still put them together if you want on your own and learn how they work a little more intimately. But the modern radios, the old radios, you were able to turn them on and off. You were able to turn the volume up and the squelch and tune a channel or tune into the right frequencies. Nowadays, well, the radio I have will interpret Morse code. So if somebody's sending Morse code on the front of my radio, it'll spell out what they're sending, which is great for
you
lummox like me.
And me. I would need that too.
You used to have tons and tons of equipment, an antenna, equipment to match your radio to the antenna. It's incorporated in my radio now, so I just push a button on the radio and it does all of that.
Tunes it.
So I've spent some time digging into the schematics on it and figuring out how my radio works, and it's really been a great experience.
Guys, we're out of time. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. One more time, what do people need to know, and what should they do for when you guys have your field day? Because I know the more people that would show up, the happier you guys would be, I imagine.
Absolutely.
Huh? What do we need to know?
Well, Saturday the 24th of June at about 2 o'clock, we would be happy to have you come over, and we'll have also some food there.
All going to be out at UW?
At UW Fond du Lac,
North
parking lot.
Yep.
And we'll be there 24 hours until 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, at which time we'll tear down by 3 o'clock. You won't even know we were ever there.
Jack Heil, Doug Schultz, and Dick Finn, I thank you all very much. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for sticking around a little bit. You guys had a long morning here. You probably seemed like you're almost doing your field operations from KFIZ here, but I thank you all very much. Really nice meting you.
Nice meeting you, both.
Yeah. All right, that was fun. I learned a lot of a really, really cool, cool activity.